Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And while it was looking like a very quiet week on the news front in EVE Online, yesterday while I was waiting for the league launch for the new league for Path of Exile, I noticed an EVE Online stream with over 1,000 viewers. And so when I took a look at that, it was a pretty damn impressive tie-dye slugfest around a Keepstar. As far as I understand it, they managed to push through the armor timer here, so all they have left is a structured timer on Monday. Very cool to see, of course. Honestly, not my cup of tea gameplay wise. Such tie-dye is absolutely horrid. Hours and hours of slugging through a battle like that, but the guys that are in there, super impressive, of course, and that does make for a pretty cool EVE Online moment, of course, every time a battle like that with thousands of players takes part and you actually catch it live. So really nice, and definitely not what I was expecting. Last week I was really given, I would say, the impression that things were quieting down on the war. But then you guys corrected me, letting me know that no, they've definitely been going after the Keepstar, and then the proof is in the pudding, of course, as now they're going after a fourth one here, and it should be destroyed. And after that, actually, lots of speculation from what I've seen in a couple of posts as well as to what the Imperium is planning to do next. So the war is definitely raging, and we'll see if that has an impact on the market. Before that, quick look at the new Eden store. You may already have noticed it on the ticker, but Plex is doing a bit of a reversal, going back up all of a sudden. So the sales, I think if we go to the services here, we have no special sales to report here. If we go to everything or the ship skins, we've got the Hex and Harrier pack that is on sale at the moment, 50% off for, well, if I'm not mistaken, these are actually some pretty cool skins, especially here. This rattlesnake skin is definitely quite nice, but yeah, nothing special to report in the services, so we get to move on straight to the market. We'll start with the pilot services as always at 2:30. There we go, and let's get started with Plex. We'll start with the chart, and you can see, while it's not super high, clearly now 5-day moving average has moved above the 20-day moving average, and then the average max prices are starting to go up well above the 4.5 million. So a bit of a reversal over the last week. Basically, I think that the sale that happened before has been absorbed, and you can see at the tail end we're not starting to go stratospheric or anything like that, so we might just be still be in that wait and see approach. On the other hand, if we look at the actual prices in JITA, we're closing in on 4.7 million for the sellers, and then buyers are at 4.4 million. Still a pretty narrow spread between sellers and buyers, and trade, of course, dominated by JITA. If we then go to the multiple pilot train certificate, which some people have pointed out that the reason why the trade is completely dropping off is that this is becoming more of a legacy item, so you can't really purchase these anymore, and then you get, of course, some really crazy charts all over the place. Currently they are still selling at 2.2 billion and almost 2 billion for the buyers, but eventually when things look really bleak, especially on like multiple days without any sales and things like that, we'll retire this from the segment, as that it doesn't really make too much sense to keep a close eye on this one. Next up, we've got the skill extractors that are slowly going back up as well, basically following the Plex trend, without that that pullback which we saw last week. So quite a different chart. You can see that here between Plex and skill extractors, but all of that, of course, due to a massive sale here in January that pushed the price down to less than 400 million ISK, was recovering decently well, but then it basically took a couple of months for us to really get back into a flow where we have a little bit of a difference, right? Basically flat for about a month straight, and just in the last couple of weeks we have started to move back up in price for the skill extractors. They're currently selling for 526 million and 509, so just a 16-17 million ISK spread between sellers and buyers on something that costs over $500 million. It is, again, not a lot. There's still a lot of competition for these pilot services. impact on the injectors. Here are the large scale injectors that have also basically immediately recovered from the plex sale that did push prices down. Minimum prices definitely going down for a couple of days there as well, but the market says this is over. All right, we are back basically at the highest range for the entire year at the moment for the injectors, 956 million, basically closing in on that 1 billion ISK mark, and then 901, so a 55 million on almost a billion ISK in price is again a pretty narrow spread, although 5-ish%. We might have seen a smaller spread. And then of course when something like this happens, you've got something that's basically large enough in impact, which was probably this plex sale here, to impact both markets at the same time. You have that same type of recovery. So you can see over the last week, basically full recovery for the price of small scale injectors as well. And we are back at 194 million for the sellers to 180. So that's definitely a bit of a difference. 14 million on something that's a 190. That is definitely between the 5 and the 10% spread. That is a larger spread, you could say, for these pilot services. Next up, we've got the daily alpha injectors, and this is going to be a real test for our central bank as we have a double step breakout from that 50 million. So after the last sale, that when we were above 50 million, CCP managed to bring the price back down to 40 million, but I think at this point the market knows what's up. So in just a matter of a couple of weeks, we were right back on that 50 million, staying just below that, still enough sell pressure, but all of this, right, pure profits for those that jumped in down here at the 40 million, 40 to 50 million, that's pretty damn nice profit margin. And then of course, there's just not enough reason to keep prices low, and so that pressure when built up to the 50 million mark. Market really hesitated to push through on that, but now you can see in 2 steps we are well above the 50 million mark. Daily alpha injectors coming in now at 57.5 million, and then the buyers, they have no choice, 52.5 million as well. About a 10% spread on this one, a little bit less, but definitely an impressive spread on that double top or that double build up to the current price, which is the highest price for the last 6 months or so. So obviously buyers want cheaper daily alpha injectors, but the market knows what's up. Inflation is the name of the game. We should be going higher. That's exactly what's happening here. But now you've got to be a little bit careful, right? You can take your very nice profits from your nice profits to your very nice profits, I would say, right? If you bought in at around 40, 45 million, sell at 57, you're looking pretty damn good. But know that this party could end at some point as well when CCP comes in with a sale. Very, very interesting. Definitely something that I predicted as well is that it's going to become harder and harder for CCP to keep this in check. And you can also see here between the sales, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months almost, then you get 3 months almost, and now we're almost 2 months in, and we have another pretty impressive spike that, well, any central bank I think would not like to see on their chart. So it's gonna be interesting to see what the response will be, if we'll get a response, and how things will develop for the daily alpha injectors. Finally, here are the hypercores also turning that corner with the 5-day back above the 20-day moving average. I think it is started too early to say that this is all about what the big battle in nullsec. So definitely a bit of a reversal here in the psychology for the market is what I'm seeing, from perhaps a little bit of a wait and see approach to maybe we should invest a little bit in the pilot services and pushing prices up slightly. Next up, we have the mineral market coming in at 9 minutes. And there we go. As always, we start with titanium, and this is then not what I expected. If I can get you guys to see a little bit better what's happening. You can see we have more pressure over the last week in titanium. We've seen it on the ticker as well. Megasite showing up right now that it's not only in titanium, but you would think with such a big battle that a little bit of hoarding action might come into play. The one thing that is to be noted though is that we've stalled for the last couple of days, but titanium is currently selling at, Let's take a look at the GDA prices here. 409, so just below the 410, and buyers are still at 4 ISK. So there is enough demand to keep us at 4 ISK, but the spread has gone down to next to nothing on probably a little bit too much supply for the current demand. It's going to be interesting to see what happens on Monday, of course. If Keepstar blows up, that could be the push that we need for higher prices, and that's honestly something that I would wait for now. If you're actively mining a lot, then for this weekend I would definitely hold off on selling, try to be a part of the movement that pushes the prices back up, and if that can then gets exacerbated by lots of destruction in nullsec, you could be in for some very happy times selling just early next week rather than right now. Then we've got Pyrite, same story, actually no difference. Well, while the 20-day moving average is continuing to go down, we're basically mostly flat for the week, and we're trying to hold on to that 10 ISK. 10.23 for the buyers, that's working out. 11.03 for the sellers. But yeah, same story here. We know that a big battle has just taken place in nullsec, and a big loss might come on the books on Monday. So as a result, I would, for at least the next couple of days, wait and see if a better price is not possible. Then we have the Mexalon market, and that is the bad news that I was not expecting on the action that's happening at the moment. We're actually down below the 60 ISK for Mexalon. Gave away more ground, 57 to 54 for the buyers. Still a pretty narrow spread, but clearly there is more supply going on now than there is demand for, and I think you can see the average trade volumes are down as well. So it is not so much that supply has exploded or anything like that. I think it's more that there's less expectation of huge losses, huge industry change that need to be started up because of what's happening in nullsec. That's my personal take on it, but that is my read of a move like this. Then we've got Isogen next, right here. Also stalling, but you can see at the tail end starting to have a little bit of upwards pressure again. 590 to 580, very narrow spread, but we are back below the 600 ISK price range. On the other hand, I feel like the industries are feeling that new reality of Isogen. I even spotted a post over the last week mentioning that Isogen was becoming a real bottleneck, a real problem. Where are we going to get enough Isogen to keep the factories going all out? It's not an easy proposition, which is why I would not be surprised that on a big push up for the other resources, Isogen could have a really good time all of a sudden, because it's not easy. It is now a low-sec mineral, which does mean a lot more risk and a lot harder to bring everything to market or even to your own industrial facility. So Isogen, bit of pressure, just like all the other minerals in the last couple of weeks, but the first one to really start to show signs that the daily averages are going to come back up, and that we might get another one of these crossings of the 5-day to the 20-day moving average. I think next week could be very interesting, especially if nullsec remains active as it is. Then we get Noxium, a little bit of a more pronounced dip early last week, but then at the tail end again you can see the same story here. Minerals from low sec are perhaps anticipating a change, of course, here. 927 for the sellers, 885 for the buyers. Still a pretty narrow spread, quite normal of course, but these are showing their first signs that maybe the market is starting to think differently on what just happened in nullsec. And so if high sec minerals are lagging behind, again, I'd hold off this weekend on selling everything that I've got and trying to see if we can get a better price next week, early next week, because I think might not last very long, right? The market can shift very quickly. And then if we go to nullsec, here is the Zydrine chart, already doing the same thing. Basically last 5 days, moved back up from a pretty serious pullback, 2,500, and then at the lows here, 2.2 or something like that, 2,140, actually pretty serious pullback. So we're back at 2,300 for the sellers, almost the same for the buyers, but then pretty flat at the current range, basically seeing where do we go from here, because of course, if we look at Megasite, same also flattening out in the last 4 or 5 days, but clearly a pretty serious pullback here as well. Almost 3,500 ISK, down to 2,700 for the sellers, 2.5 for the buyers, losing another 10% this week. It's Quite a nice pullback. Looks like a bit of dumping happening here, considering the 1-year high point. So we'll see where we go from here, but again, my expectation, if Nosek keeps showing us awesome streams like that, then we might see higher prices come back for minerals. Then we have Morphite finally, that is doing a little bit of a delayed response, but finally doing what you would expect Morphite to do as we start to pull lower and lower from that 40,000 ISK mark. Eventually supplies just dry up. The suppliers say, nope, we want our 40k as much as possible for Morphite, so let's hold on. And then we are right back to the 40k for the sellers. And buyers, look how they are forced into that same motion, 39,000 now. So it's definitely been the volumes that went down the drain as prices went down, and then everything just stalled, and we had to move up back to that higher range before traders were and suppliers were happy enough to keep the Morphite market going. So we're back at 40k very quickly after getting to a pretty low price point, right, close to the lowest of the year. So if you're looking for a Morphite trade, it is something to keep in mind, especially if you have an idea as to why all of a sudden we could break out to go back above 40k. But I personally don't see too many reasons for that at the moment. And then next up, we've got the PI market at 1605. I think this one could be interesting to see if I'm right on potentially right on expecting a turnaround in the mineral market, especially the high-tech mineral market. Then we'll have to see if, for instance, the advanced PI materials are the first ones to respond. And there it is already to respond to what just happened in nullsec. And yeah, then you would expect something like this. Last week it was looking like we've got pressure for about 10 days, and we don't see any real reason for a bounce back, unless of course what happened yesterday happens, but it really looked like things were quieting down. The market is expecting things to quiet down, won't need too much, and then of course when the keep star is threatened, all of a sudden we find our way back right above 2.5 million. So very impressive chart here. 2.6 million for the sellers, above 2.5 for the buyers. Full recovery from the broadcast nodes back at the highest point of the year. Construction blocks, actually they were doing, a lot of refined PI materials were doing the opposite last week, breaking out then, and then for this last couple of days basically flat to also seeing higher max prices starting to come in here as well. Almost 12,000 for the sellers, 11,290, definitely a great price. Coolants then, we've got an opposite response here all of a sudden, but still above 10,000 ISK. 10,680 for the sellers, 10,000 for the buyers. Probably a little bit of the buyers getting exhausted here on the coolants market. It's also a super common item, so overall I wouldn't see this as a real game changer, but it has, I have to say that coolants has been like my surprise strong PI material over the last 8 months or so. The one that really broke out to 11k, managed to stay there for a month straight, and has some pretty impressive high points from time to time with pretty narrow spread, lots and lots of demand. So I still think that producing towards fuels is not a bad plan, but it is true that it is super common. Of course, you get big volumes, but you also then have potentially, when there is oversupply, a longer period of lower prices, which is not the case, for instance, for enriched uranium, way harder to make, as you can also immediately see that it commands a much better price. And over the last week, we basically tried to start the upwards movement, and now over the last 4 or 5 days, basically flat at 14,000 for the sellers, 13,400 for the first buyer. So I think I can actually open this up here. Nope. Probably not for the sellers, but for the buyers we can, because the Tranquility Trading Tower definitely has some buyers in there as well. But you can see a pretty narrow spread and definitely a very high point for the prices as well. Integrity response drones then stemming the bleeding, and you can see yesterday all of a sudden how that average price for the day went right back to the highest point of that chart as well, basically matching last week. 3.2 million for the sellers and above 3 million for the buyers. Advanced PI material is right back, I would say. Mechanical parts holding on really well as well. 12,200 to 11,970, so that's a 300 disc spread on a 12,000 disc item. Very, very low spread, showing that strong demand. The expectation for the market is basically right back. We're gonna need lots and lots of PI. There's not enough, and so the prices are super high. Almost 20,000 for miniature electronics, so that's a crazy high price. Nano factories, not too convincing just yet, but you can see that we basically stopped the descent, and then that we are coming in on crossing that 20-day moving average here as well. 1.4 million for these. Organic mortar applicators, there's the cross, right, going straight back up. Not yet at the 1 year high point prices, but well above the 125 on the chart. 1.3 million for the sellers, almost 1.3 million for the buyers as well. Clearly a reversal here all of a sudden. Recursive computing module, not showing that reversal just yet, but we have to be honest, of course. Crazy volumes on some scraped information from the test server pushes up to 4 million. Definitely a unique speculative bubble here for recursive computing models, so don't expect a 1 year high point to be matched anytime soon, but keep the previous range of around 1.5 million in range, and then you get an idea where we could push back to or where we could then bounce back from. So still super expensive, of course, at the moment. Next, we've got our robotics, able to stay above 100,000 disc is pretty impressive. Definitely seeing some pressure in the last week though. It's gonna be interesting to see if we can hold on to the 100,000 with buyers just above that. But yeah, full recovery from my historical perspective. Robotics 100,000 disc was what I used to know. Then our rocket fuels are continuing to show signs of pressure, but pressure from where? 15,000 disc as the high range here. So we're just basically moving down to a range just below 14,000 disc, buyers just below 13,000 disc. Pretty normal margin spread between sellers and buyers here, and overall I would say this is just a response that enough supply is finally coming in, considering refined PI materials has been selling for 15,000 disc for about 2.5 months straight. So overall I think this is just people able to make some more rocket fuel, bring it to the market and bring the price down to, well, still great levels, just not crazy levels. Then we get our self-harmonizing power cores easily staying above 2.5 mil. A bit surprised at the tail end here. Look at those minimum prices starting to drop off, and on a couple of days matching the daily average, but 2.7 to 2.5 million. Yeah, a little bit of exhaustion in the buyer market I think here as well. Our smart fab units definitely breaking the trend here, going well below the average of the last 5-6 months, coming down to 65,000 for the sellers, 58,000 for the buyers. So specialized PI material well below 100k, definitely not in line with most of the PI market. Then our sterile conduits basically flat for the week at 1.3 million. Supercomputers are, well, still very expensive, 150,000 for the sellers. Bit of spread opening up here, but of course at such prices that's normal. Synthetic oil landing on the 10,000 disc, 10.3 to 9,600. Definitely a little bit of a difference here as well. It's going to be interesting to see where we go from here, but it could really be the same story. Synthetic oil might not be that hard to make, and then you get a couple of months of 15,000 disc. So lots of players coming in with, all right, I'm going to make my own synthetic oil. It's better than coolants, better than construction blocks, better than everything else, and a bit too much of a response here, bringing the prices back down. Then we get synthetic synapses, still healthy above 100k as well, 130 to 126. Transcranial microcontrollers back above 100,000 convincingly as well, 108 to 112. And then our water-cooled CPU, I'm definitely a little bit interested in that one. And look at this, volumes increased again. We're back above 10,000 disc. We get a big spread between minimum and maximum prices, but sellers coming in at 10,700, 82 for the buyers. Definitely feels like water-cooled CPU are back on the menu for a lot of industrial processes. And then finally, the wetware mainframes that are cooling down, but cooling down above 2.5 million is definitely still quite expensive. 2.65 for the sellers, almost 2.6 million for the buyers. So those that had the biggest pushbacks of the last week, especially in the advanced PI materials, have either stabilized or even saw their prices go back up substantially. And I think again a lot might depend on what we see on Monday. Will we see another big fight, or is it going to be an uncontested timer? I think that because it's now in structure that the weapon systems and things like that are down, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that should give the attackers basically an extra edge over the fight that they had to go through yesterday, and as a result most people are basically expecting that to be in the bag. But if we could get another big fight there, that could be very, very interesting for the market. So I'd hold on when it comes to the resource trades. There is no certainty, of course, but if things explode again, then next week could be very interesting when it comes to higher prices. Next we have the advanced moon materials at 25.30. There we go. Let's go with the carbides first. As always, here is crystalline carbonite. Bit of a pullback for the week from 150 down to 135, but basically the new range 125 to 150 on the chart is the gains that we have seen, and this still feels well within bounds of calling it a stable item at this point. No signs of super volatility. There was a little bit in metamaterials last week, but we'll see that in a moment. Here is titanium carbide next. Definitely pretty stable for the week above 150. Nothing too special to report here. Ferrite carbide for Minmatar is going back up, but honestly, I would not be surprised if the big battle has something to... Ooh, look at the volumes though. Volumes are down the drain, so no. Let's take a look at it. 140 to 124. Supplies not great, but it's definitely there. Perhaps the market is realizing how much ferrite carbide was lagging behind compared to everything else, and so we get a little bit of replacing things at a new range that's a little bit more in line with what you would expect, because otherwise on such low volumes I don't have a good explanation. Maybe big buying here, but it's not even that crazy in volume, so I'm not sure. Ferrite carbide definitely back up, but I'm not sure we would call this the start of volatility, as we haven't even broken 150. We don't even come close. And finally we got a MAR that's then pulling back, coming back below the 150, selling now for 145. Might just be price responses that do happen here, because it is of course an imported item. So when prices go high enough, finally suppliers wake up, bring in enough materials, and we go back down. And for, oops, it's the Minmatar one, when prices are low enough, finally supplies dry up, and then maybe on a little bit of buying we can push the price back up, something like that. But I'm not sure we should call this the start of volatility, although all of a sudden we do have two pretty impressive price moves on the chart. For metamaterials next, here is photonic metamaterials for Galente, able to plateau at 12.5. Not what I expected, but if you followed my trade, this is where I'd made investments basically in the period before the nerf. So you can sell, and to my surprise you can still sell at 13,000 ISK for photonic metamaterials, 12.8 for the buyers as well. Now this will end up caving, right? Supply will find its way to this market and bring the price back down, but that's pretty impressive. I thought we would already be down quite a bit this week, so prolonged sell opportunity in the photonic metamaterials at the highest price of the year. Then for Caldari, it's non-linear metamaterials that's, well, slowly pushing also to the highest price of the year, well above 15,000. But you can see that basically for the last 2-3 weeks here, maybe even more, almost a month, we have been started to move around that 15,000 ISK range. 16 for the sellers, 15.3 for the buyers. If you bought down here again, like around 10,000 disc, you get a nice sale, you get a nice profit to take. But when it comes to the medium to long term expectation, we might just get stuck on a new range here. Then we've got Minmatar, which is plasmonic metamaterials. That one has a little bit more trade potential at the start of the chart, and then December when the nerf hit advanced bone mining. But then you can see, in my opinion, we are losing volatility in the 12 to 13,000 disc range. So yeah, 12,000 to 12,000, super narrow margin here as well. But I personally don't see us like make new highs or anything like that anytime soon. And then for Amar, it's terahertz metamaterials that had a nice slow build up through the month of March from below 15,000 to 20,000 disc, and now I think basically we get that same supply response as with the carbide, bringing prices back down 16 to 16,000 here as well. So this is a price response on maintained high prices. So honestly, if you still want to sell your plasmonic metamaterials for Galente, you gotta hurry, because we can expect this to happen next week as well. For the other advanced boom materials, we've got fermionic condensates doing another step up to 50,000, but then quickly coming back down. So 50,000, 47,000 here, and you can see at the tail end here how the daily averages are already trending back towards these buyers. So yeah, expect some supply to be brought in here as well, and that will probably close that gap towards that 44. So I think this is starting to become the story, that there are some supply problems here and there that can pop up, maybe due to the war, maybe due to other reasons. But the response for the market is that it's slowly creeping up the price, and then when the price is high enough, the market wakes up, we bring in new supply, and we bring the price back down a little bit. So there might be some trading to be found in this, but overall the super volatile way of doing things and us reaching new one-year highs and things like that, that doesn't seem to be on the book. So here, for instance, we overshot a little bit in early March, and so the price response probably has a little bit more legs. You can see how the volumes are actually still pretty high after that, and then the price is slowly moving back down below 25,000 disc for those buyers. So next we've got Fullerites, right? A little bit too much as well. Brought the price back down to 700. We're slowly edging back up, but we're not going for like 1,000 disc or anything like that. That would be volatility. That's not happening. We basically have market variations at these new ranges. Synaptic fibers super steady above 6,000 disc. Nano transistors also stabilizing above 3,000 disc. Phenolic composites stabilizing below 1500 disc. I mean, it's gonna be the story. And then we do have our pressurized oxidizers, a newer material with a nice double top at 15,000 disc. And then of course it is like a pattern for some reason in the markets. We've got we can't maintain this, and we move back down to a previous support, which was around 10,000 disc. So that's a pretty big move, and these two would have been tradable. This decline is also to be expected. Then here we'll probably see some resistance at that 10,000 disc range, and then you can decide, will we test the 7.5 before jumping in, or is buying below 10,000 disc where the market will say, all right, we gotta start buying our pressurized oxidizers, because here is another 50% trade that we can potentially make out of that. So it's definitely interesting to see this pattern. Here we get a double top as well, starting to come down for reinforced carbon fiber, breaking below 12.5, 12,000 now for the sellers, 11,720. And so the game here again is going to be, where will we see resistance, where will people start to buy again? But you could start buying slowly, I think, here for pressurized oxidizers. This chart looks kind of interesting from that perspective. And then we get ceramic fibers that are basically flattened out at the new range as well, around 350. So not that much to say. What could change things here? Even more war in Nullsec, of course, creating problems for the supplies. Next up, we have the Take-Two ships coming in at 33.40. There we go. Let's go through the list and see what's been happening. So the Basilisk continuing the slow and steady decline back towards 130. You can even see a couple of days ago here, minimum price below 130 million. Buyers are below 130 million. If you're looking for the Tech 2 trade, I would start to look into this 143 to below 130 million for the buyers. I don't see us push down to a 110 or anything like that, but this is clearly a pretty sharp decline, and you can then see the potential selling at 160, 180 on a real rush for the Basilisk, which again, look at Nelsec, it could happen. This might be the turnaround, and this would be that trigger. So yeah, buyers at 130. If you can still try to snag a cheap one, I would probably consider doing that. Then we get to Cerberus flat at 150, not the chart we want to see. 162 to 148. So yeah, too stable. And not in the right spot to be jumping in. Probably too early to sell as well, in my opinion. Then we get the Curse, same story again, very flat at 180, so you don't want to jump in here and you don't want to jump off here either if you've got the investments. Damnation staying above 300 million, flattening out as well. Look at how very slow this downwards curve is, just landing on that 300 million with the minimum prices. So that's really not the action that we're looking for. So again, I wouldn't jump in unless we break through that 300 million. And of course we don't want to sell here either. Deacon doing a little bit of a jump and a little bit more daily averages all over the place. That could be a precursor to some volatility, but unfortunately we're pretty high on the market, of course, so I wouldn't jump in just yet. Then the Eagle, yeah, same story, 150, super flat. Next we've got the EOS, that's a little bit better, double top. So a couple days ago you could have sold these for 400 million. Again, we're still at 320, 297 for the buyers. No, actually just at 320, so we're starting to come back down very quickly. Here again I would look, can we get close to a 250? That's where I would jump in, and maybe now with the double top we might have the momentum to do so. It was clearly the previous resistance range for the minimum prices. Then we get the Aries, little bit of pressure building, but in my opinion not enough to really jump in just yet. I would love to see 40 million come into play on the minimum prices. After that we have the Flycatcher, also very stable above 50. Then we've got the Guardian starting to move back up, so I think a little bit of buying happening in from Nelsec is what's pushing the prices up. But again, the increased volatility, that is not here yet. Heretic, right, our major exceptions were of course interdictors. Those have been massively overbought, I would even say, pushing prices up to 70 million in 2 steps from 40 million. Starting to come down, but still super expensive at 60 million. So if you still have some lying around and you want to take those profits, I think you can still definitely do so. Pushing us back down to 50 million should be something that the market can do. Then we get the Hound, still stuck, right, full week, stuck just below 20. Are those buyers dropping off? They're at 18 million. You know, lose these 3 buyers, get to 17, and it looks way more interesting than what we get now. But I'll be honest, a Hound at 18 million on a big spike towards 25 or something like that is not that bad a trade either. So you could look into that if you want to. Ikitursa super flat as well, honestly. Then we get the Ishtar. You can see again max prices starting to come down, so we're clearly stabilizing here below the 180. Not the best place to be. 171 to 167, very narrow spread here as well between sellers and buyers, way above the entire chart, so difficult to trade in this. Kirin, same story, just landing well above 20. Manticore, bit of a pullback, but the minimum price is not able to break 20 here, so buyers should still be above that. 19.5, that's interesting. They're starting to break, maybe. Hound is like not yet, but maybe. So I'd keep an eye if you're looking to buy at some of these stealth bombers. Here's the Nemesis as well, right? Just not moving anywhere. But let's take a look at the buyers. So we're already selling 18.5, buyers 17.3, and look at that, it's not that many. And we drop off below the 17 here as well. So maybe that can happen. Then the Nighthawk, very bad chart here for some reason, but a little bit of panic buying here in this command ship. It was the last one that was basically still at 300 million, stuck there for a couple of months. So this one felt cheap compared to the higher ranges of most of these other command ships. This is not entirely unexpected. I think even last week I mentioned that if you still want in on something, you were close to the 250 on a couple of days here. Look at those minimum prices. You could have jumped in about 2 weeks ago. And even last week, you could have probably bought at around 270, 275, something like that. And then, of course, when the market probably also goes in for some more command ships, you're jumping up to 350 million. So a nice sell opportunity right now for the Nighthawk. Then we get the Oneros coming back down. Look at those minimum prices touching under 30 again. Yeah, 125. So I would say that looks pretty good. We're down here, and down here now for the buyers. So if you can buy below 130 million for the Oneros, you can definitely do so. But again, 25 a day, so I would never buy more than one. And then the Purifier testing 20 million here as well on the minimum prices. I need to see us break it, which is just again 3 buyers. But yeah, stealth bombers, if this has enough momentum, maybe a buy opportunity can show up here. Rook very stable at 150. Then the Saber had that early bump up to 60 million as well, starting to come down. We're back below 50 million. But here I would also take the gamble that we went so high for the interdictors that supplies will be too much and that will go back, let's say, below 40. That's where you can, in my opinion, start to buy. We're still a ways from that at 43. Yep, it could happen. Look at the supplies here, right? Even in the last 24 hours, 19, 23, 10, 10, 30, 10, 19, another 30, and etc. Really pushing those sell prices down very quickly. And then those buyers are already at 43 million. Doesn't need that much more, 30, 40 ships, and we're down below the 40 million. If these guys keep going at this pace, that could happen. So that's something to keep in mind. I think if this has enough downwards pressure momentum, perhaps a Saber below 40 million might be possible. And I think that's another take two trade that you could make there. Scalpel, what's it going for? 19 to 16 million. Not a lot of buyers. 16 feels pretty cheap, can definitely spike above 20. So if you absolutely need that trade, you can try it, but volumes are not great on this ship. Then we get the Scimitar. I'm doing a lot better health wise, but still have sometimes some stuff in my throat. But yeah, here we go. Scimitar 130 to 117. The Scimitar below 120 feels like it could be okay to try to jump in on that. And then we get the Sleipnir slowly landing on 250. So where are those buyers at? 258, 272 to 258. But honestly, if we look at the other command ships, right? Damnation is well above 300 million. EOS just spiked up to 350, and then Nighthawk just spiked up to 350. I would say it's something to consider, because you still have by far the cheapest command ship, and it is well below 300 million, where it has been stuck since mid-February. So you could, you know, try to buy one, I think, on this one. It is quite speculative though, but all the others, this is now, if you need a command ship on the field, this is probably what you'll buy. Then the Vagabond, stable above 150, and finally the Zarmast with minimum prices back below 400 as well, 391. Yeah, maybe 2 here buy opportunities if you think that a 600 million sell price might come back at some point. Definitely an interesting, more interesting time here in the Tech 2 ship market, because you get some sell opportunities, you get some buy opportunities. The only unfortunate thing is, again, with advanced moon materials stabilizing, I think Tech 2 ship market is set to also stabilize at this point. I don't expect like new very pronounced 1-year high points unless Nelsec comes through and keeps the war going, and maybe even increasing the pace of destruction. Next up, Tech 3 ships coming in at 43.30. Like that. Let's start with those destroyers. Were they fielded yesterday? Well, for the Confessor, I don't think immediate replacements were needed. Look at those minimum prices diving off a cliff. 60 million for the sellers, 45 million for the buyers. That is an absolutely crazy spread between sellers and buyers, of course, which I think does show that it's just not really the item to be all that hot. Now, if you want to look for the off-meta trade, of course, try to buy here. You immediately have that spread, and if a Confessor fleet becomes needed in nullsec, you get your cheap one and you've got your profit. It is possible, but I think that this trade in tactical destroyers would completely depend on tactical destroyer fleets being fielded in nullsec and actually getting blown up as well. But the spread is just crazy, of course. Then we get the Hecate, also with minimum prices now going below 55 million, has 59 for the sellers, 54 for the buyers. Availability is not great, and still we've got this pretty big spread here. So yeah, 10% spread. On this one, not as good as the Confessor, of course, so I wouldn't touch it. If you absolutely want to, you could maybe... Nah, it's even selling at a high price point. I wouldn't touch this one. Then we get the Jackdaw. That is a bit more interesting, I think, for those that are looking for that jumping point. Are we buying below 50? Just above that, 54 to 50 million. Still have plenty of supply in the last couple of days to probably make a buy order just above 50 million happen. And of course, the Jackdaw, in my opinion, is still a great ship. Although again, price proposition of it is not that great at the moment. I can see Jackdaw fleets being part of the nullsec action. So this could be a jumping point for the Jackdaw, and then, you know, feels like you might as well try it. A buy order for the Confessor, considering the spread, that would make sense to me as well. And then finally this Vapel, that's just not going anywhere. Despite all of that, it is basically stuck at the 52 million to 47 million for the buyers. Volumes are truly abysmal for these Vapel. On the cruiser front, let's take a look at the Legion that has daily prices. Difficult to say here. We'll have to look at sellers and buyers. Sellers coming in at 204, buyers coming in at 189, so 190 million. In my opinion, too much the in-between spots to be jumping in or out on this one. Then we get to Loki. That is interesting. That is exactly what we're actually looking for. Look at this, selling from 230 million down. Sellers have now pushed below 200 million, and look at that minimum price spread is starting to open up. We're talking 199 to 177. Buy orders below 180. We're still on the right side of the chart. That's a yes for me. If you want to jump in on the Tech 3 trade, you've got a buy order for the Loki that awaits you right now. It's definitely a possibility. If you can buy below 180, you're buying pretty much below the entire chart here, definitely the average chart. And as a result, this is super nice. That's your opportunity right now. Then we get the Proteus. Bit of a surprise, a week here flat above 200 million. Minimum price is actually closing the gap, so we never made it close to 180, which we did just now for the Loki. So we get 220 to 200 million. If you have a very cheap one, maybe you can sell, but otherwise not the best spot either. And then the Tengu, really all over the place. Look at that, max prices sometimes at the high here, minimum prices below 200, but overall still not enough to say we want to jump in. 210 to 195. We definitely have better sell and buy opportunities, in my opinion, to come if we can get a little bit more volatility. But the Loki is very, very interesting. This is the response that we're waiting for. Basically, someone lost patience, sold too much, pushed buy prices down below 180, but sellers are still at 199, so this is a great spread as well. If you jump in and you manage to grab one below 180, I think you've got profits on your hands. So pretty cool to see this in the Loki all of a sudden. And then finally, we come to the extra product for the week. We're going to circle back to the faction. Frigates going to take a look at that. Maybe get an idea as to faction warfare action. 4820. there, because of course the focus has been on nullsec, but we have direct enlistment that should have found its way through the game at this point, and then we get the event. So let's see what's happening here. We got ships, we've got frigates, and we've got faction frigates. We'll start with pirate faction frigates, take a look at these, but these have been pretty stable, it seems, here for the Astero at a above average, so definitely expensive price, 113 to 105, so above 110 million, quite expensive. Crewer has actually been going down in price to a below average price, below 75. That's pretty cool. Should you invest in that? I'm not really sure. It's definitely slow and steady for 6 months, but we are. Look at the minimum prices from a couple of weeks ago here, looking at the cheapest ones in quite a long time. So if you want to risk an investment here, Crewer, and then maybe you'll have to wait 5-6 months, but buy below 75, sell at 100 million, that would be pretty good. Daredevil, bit of pressure, but not really able to break down too much, so still coming in at 97 million for the sellers and 90 million for the buyers. Then we get the Dramiel, bit of pressure at the tail end, definitely above average on this one as well, 100 million for the sellers. Garmer, super stable above 100 million, not much to say on this one. Succubus, let's see if we can get the chart to show something, but yeah, above 100 million, above average, definitely still pretty expensive. And then finally the Worm going for 110 as well. So overall, pirate faction ships are very expensive, with the exception of the Crewer. And then our Navy faction ships. Let's go through the list on this one and see what's been happening. All right, little so since January, definitely down in price, but little spike here at the tail end, managed to push to 11 million and is already coming back down. So currently selling below 10 million, buyers at 9 million. The current trend here, well, we'll go through a couple more before we decide on a trend, but here is Federation Navy Comet, doesn't even have its bump, is basically at the lowest price range for the year, selling below 9 million. Imperial Navy Slicer does have that little bump here, but you can see how the response came in very quickly, and we're trading back well below 10 million on this one as well. And Republic Fleet Firetail on the full 1 year chart, nothing too special, but also trading well below 10 million ISK. So overall, I would say that it looks to me like, while activity has maybe not completely exploded, definitely on some of them, like here the Galente and Amar ones, you're seeing that there is huge availability and that prices are actually down and quite low, which was one of the possible scenarios, of course, that more activity means more rewards, and that actually means more supply and lower prices. That seems to be what's happening here. Let's take a quick look at the Skybreaker, that is also falling down, but from a 1 year high point of almost 100 million, it's now going for 78, and buyers are at 60 million. So the Skybreaker, for some reason, losing a lot of ground, buying for 60 million. If you want one of these, I mean, I have one of these, and they're pretty cool, of course, with their unique weapon system. This would be probably the time to put up your buy order. But if we continue, here is Crucifier Navy Issue, clearly trading now below 10 million as well. On average, 11 to 7 million. Big gap opening up here. Griffin Navy Issue, look at that, also below 10 million, quite stable there. Heron Navy Issue, 10 million as well, 9 million for the buyers. Amicus Navy Issue, 8.6 million, so Galente availability definitely up. Magnate Navy Issue, above 10 million for the sellers, but also 9 million for the buyers. Maulus Navy Issue, you can see the pressure here, slow and steady for the last couple of months, probably close to the 1 year, yep, actually 1 year low point at the moment, below 9 million for the sellers. Probe Fleet Issue is going for 10, but 8.2 for the buyers, and then Vigil Fleet Issue is going below 10 million. Honestly, the buyers here as well, it's not that many, right? On some of these, look at the Maulus Navy Issue, for instance. Not that many buyers for these either. Definitely pretty big spread between sellers and buyers, and this at pretty low prices. So overall, I think that story is confirmed. The impact of the current faction warfare changes have basically increased supply and lowered prices for faction ships at the moment, at least certainly here for the frigate section. 10 million basically, and you've got your ship, and then you can take part. They're pretty awesome exploration ships, for instance. There's, I think, unique content for them to do as well, so it feels like there is the faction warfare expansion niche that is doing quite well and providing us with lots of supplies at the moment. And there we go, guys. That's it for this EVE talk. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.